This season of anime was full of so many highly anticipated new and returning series. In this video, I will be reviewing the 15 different shows I watched that started and or finished in the winter 2021 season. The reviews are told in a ranked order from worst to best, and each rank is time-stamped in the description if you want to start anywhere. There are also show-specified timestamps at the end of the description. I do assign a score to each show, but those aren't included in this video as I often update those scores. To view the scores and all up-to-date info, that can be viewed from my AniList account, which will be linked in the description. I will also try my best to avoid spoiling too much in each singular review, but sequel seasons may spoil previous seasons, so keep that in mind when viewing any review of a sequel season. Now with all that said and explained, let's jump into the first review. Enjoy. I find no pleasure in ranking this show at the bottom. The first season of The Promised Neverland is one of the best shows I've ever watched. The show featured some of the best mental showdowns I've ever seen, with great characters, relationships, story twists, and an amazing score. Every part of the plot is concise and well told, and I highly recommend the first season to anyone, anime fan or not. But unfortunately, I can't say the same for this season. What the hell happened, guys? How did this script make it out of the editing room? Did the studio trust the author that much? What an immense drop in writing quality, and I can't believe this was the same team for one of my favorite studios out there. I've never read the manga, but I can only imagine how this made the manga readers feel after watching the first few episodes. If you haven't seen the show yet, watch the first season and just pretend this season never happened, or pick up where the manga continues after the first season. The first few episodes are fine, and they don't really allude to the drop in quality to come. It isn't really until the time skip occurs where everything goes downhill. This time skip jumps past a third of the manga apparently, cutting out some fan favorite moments. I was prepared for the change in tone before starting this season, and I knew it wasn't going to be the same contained thriller we got in Season 1 since we aren't in the same contained setting in Season 2. But nothing could prepare me for this. For everything good they added, there are a dozen mistakes. I really liked the new characters Sonju and Mujika. I enjoyed watching them interact with Emma and Rei and the other kids. The group learning to survive was well done, and an important note to hit on with the new setting. Everything was coming together pretty well, and it seemed like we were in for another great season. But everything started to go downhill after episode 3. All of a sudden, it was like I was watching the final season of Game of Thrones again. As if the writers hit the plot into overdrive and started speedrunning the show into the ground. None of the characters' feelings or choices made any sense to me. All of a sudden, Emma's sorta sympathetic to the demons. You know, the species' existence is entirely dependent on eating people. Maybe it would have made more sense if something happened during that time skip, but for all we know, nothing happened in that gap in time other than they survived. And I'm sorry, but meeting 2 nice demons is not enough for a complete change of heart. And the show is full of strange character choices like that. It sucks to watch a show that I loved so much get butchered like this. I was always hoping for a moment that would turn it all around, that would make all this nonsense make sense. But each episode gets worse than the last. I can't even say that at least the animation was nice, because the last 2 episodes are essentially PowerPoint presentations, and I promise you, that's no exaggeration. I guess the music is still good, thankfully, but it's not like that's going to save the show at all. This is the only show on this list where I don't think anyone has anything to gain by watching it. There is no one I would recommend this show to. The Promised Neverland Season 2 is the worst show I watched in the winter 2021 season, which really hurts when I know it could have been so much more. Honestly, I really don't have a whole lot to say about the second season of Cells at Work. I didn't find the first season to be anything too special, but it's not like I was expecting a lot in the first place. That being said, the first season was still cute, funny, and charming, as well as pretty informative, and the last couple episodes were actually very well done. With the second season, however, a lot of the charm has eroded away. The premise got stale pretty quickly, and I really don't know why they bothered with a second season when there wasn't much to build on in the first place. The duo of the red blood cell and white blood cell that carried the first season is barely present here, and the show definitely suffers because of that. The new characters and their interactions are not nearly as fun and memorable as the ones from the first season. Of all the shows on this list, this show was the one where I checked the progress bar the most. Each episode just felt longer than it really was. I kind of wish I watched the spin-off Cells at Work Black instead. I can't really say it would have been better, but at least it seems like they were going for something new there. The show still serves well for educational purposes, but it's conveyed almost as if it's meant for children, while at the same time featuring bloody action. Because of that, I really don't know what kind of audience Cells at Work is going for with this contrasting approach. Cells at Work Black seems to go in a more mature approach, along with an important message about overworked employees, so it may mesh better with the bloody action. Again, I'm only speculating based on what I've heard from others though. I think the studio also knew they didn't really have a whole lot to work with this season, as it's only 8 episodes long, so if you want to give it a chance, it's not going to be a big investment for you. Cells at Work doesn't really do anything terribly, but it doesn't do anything of note either, making it a mostly unmemorable experience. I don't really know who I could recommend this show to, but I'm sure someone could find something they like from this season. It just wasn't for me, and I probably won't revisit this if a third season comes out. Otherside Picnic was a show with a lot of potential that failed to capitalize on it. Don't get me wrong, this might be 13th place, but all the shows from here on I did generally enjoy. However, I can't help but feel like there's something missing that's keeping Otherside Picnic from being great. The concept of an alternate world parallel to ours that houses urban legends from the internet offers a lot of possibilities, but it isn't really capitalized on. There were only a handful of times where the intended sense of fear and dread were actually effective, and I think it has a lot to do with how the other side's monsters can be defeated. You see, eldritch monsters are not scary in the traditional sense, but you get that eerie feeling that accompanies the sense of the unknown. However, this will all fall apart if you can take one out with a simple pistol or rifle shot. All sense of fear or intimidation instantly melts away when the protagonists have all they need to take on the other side by the first episode. You see, Soro, one of the mains, obtains the ability to see parts of the other side that are otherwise invisible to anyone else. And this instantly removes any danger the audience could have felt. She can see most dangers and monsters' weak spots. This turns the unknown into the known, and you no longer feel any fear. There were only a couple moments that I can recall where I felt what the show's writers wanted me to feel. In each instance, it was because Soro's eye was ineffective or a non-factor. Without her eye, I think the show could have been better. The other main, Toriko, works as a partner early on with Soro, and the duo head into the other side in an effort to rescue Toriko's friend that's gone missing. They also head to the other side to make money by selling items from the other side to Kozakura, a friend that studies the other side. Toriko is probably the best character here because she's motivated, capable, and she doesn't have an overpowered ability like Soro does. She does get an ability at the same time as Soro, and that ability is that one of her hands can interact with the other side in ways that you normally couldn't. But for the most part, her ability is ineffective without Soro's eye to guide her. You see, I keep pressing it, but Soro's eye is really the main issue here that's keeping the show from being something special. The main duo is fun to watch, and I really like seeing their relationship grow and see Toriko lift those she's around up. There's a plot with some American soldiers that I really enjoyed because they don't have these supernatural abilities. It's fascinating to see how unequipped people deal with the other side and how it can eat away at you. But we only experience that secondhand since we're stuck with the duo and their unstoppable abilities. There's also a very small romance plot where Soro's kind of into Toriko, but honestly it's so inconsequential that I debated even mentioning it. It's mostly reserved for little thoughts Soro has from time to time. I would not throw this show into a romance category, so don't go into Otherside Picnic with the expectation of a Yuri romance. As a side note, the opening is pretty great. You haven't seen it yet, but I will also note at the beginning of a review if the show's opening or ending song made my top 3 for the season. Otherside's opening did not, but I still think it deserves an honorable mention. With all that said though, I'd still recommend Otherside Picnic to most people. It's definitely flawed and it needs some changes to be great, but it's still entertaining and the characters are fun to watch. The other side is still captivating at times, despite the duo's abilities, and I never found myself bored or waiting for an episode to end. Overall, I enjoyed myself, but I can't help but feel like this could have been something more. I started watching Higurashi after searching for horror anime recommendations. When I started watching it, I didn't even know that it was still releasing. I knew nothing about this series going in, not even knowing that there were a bunch of other Higurashi shows. Thankfully, the previous shows aren't necessary to understand the plot of this new installment, as it serves as a reboot. After finishing the show, however, I still couldn't help but feel like it may have been helpful to see the other shows. Higurashi's plot and premise isn't well conveyed to the audience, and perhaps knowing the premise ahead of time would have really helped. Essentially, the gimmick is that time loops over and over for reasons unknown. I wish I knew this ahead of time because I was a bit confused as to what happened when a character that just died is back in the next episode as if nothing had happened. What really got to me was that when time loops back, the main characters don't retain their memory of the past timeline. So if that's the case, wouldn't each time loop be pretty similar to each other since there isn't much stopping the same events from happening? But for some reason, events in each time loop vary a lot from the last, for what seems like almost no reason. I spoke a lot about the fear of the unknown in my last review, but not like this. This kind of unknown just leaves me lost and confused. Each time loop story though is entertaining and there are some with very well done narratives. However, each time loop erases the events of the last, so each time loop does little to serve the overall story. But Higurashi is a horror show, so how good is the horror? Well, for the most part, it's hit or miss. There wasn't a moment in the show that I can say that I was scared, but there were times that I felt uncomfortable or uneasy. When a character asks an off-the-cuff question only to be answered with a blank stare accompanied with the ever-increasing sound of cicadas to the point it becomes overwhelming, it's really well done the first time, but loses its effect after the second time they do it, and especially after the third time they try the same scare. For the most part, the scares come in the form of cute anime girls being scary from time to time. Usually the first time they try a scare, it works well enough, but they recycle a lot of them, and for the most part, it doesn't work after the first time. There was one part that I can never forget though. I can't really get into it since it happens later in the show. Let's just say I'm really glad I wasn't eating during that scene. I also wanted to give another honorable mention to the opening of Higurashi. Higurashi keeps the same opening in both seasons it aired, so I can include it here in this video. I haven't seen a lot of talk about the opening, but I think it needs to be acknowledged. The song is really good and works pretty well for the tone they're going for. Also, the animation in the opening is great, and I highly recommend you give it a listen. So hearing all of this, you might be confused as to why this isn't a little bit lower down in the rankings. Well, it has to do with the show's final third. There's a huge shift in the story dynamic that brings everything together to a more straightforward narrative. At this point, the show isn't all that interested in scaring you anymore, and instead focuses entirely on the characters. It was at this point that I was the most invested in the show, and I found myself getting excited for the next episode. And it really sucks that I can't get into it too much since it happens late in the show's run, but it was my favorite part of the show by far. The setting is also particularly good. It's in a small country town full of close-knit families with deep histories. It really sells that eerie atmosphere they go for sometimes, especially because the show follows Keiichi Maibara, the new kid in town who serves well to help the audience learn about the town and its dark history. I look forward to what they do with the setting in the future of Higurashi, as Higurashi is not its own self-contained story. It does end on a cliffhanger. Apparently we're getting a sequel in the summer 2021 season, so I'll definitely check it out since it continues the plotline that was introduced in the last third. I'm just not expecting anything brilliant, but it's totally possible that I could be happily surprised.
短い言葉で心を表せ街灯用紙の空欄がち
I think a lot of people got the wrong idea about what kind of show bottom tier character Tomozaki was. I saw a lot of takes on the show before it was released that it was going to be about some shut-in incel complaining about life. And Tomozaki is definitely on that path of thinking in the beginning of the story, spouting off a lot of complaints about life, calling the game of life a garbage game where he's a bottom tier character. However, that line of thinking is actually quickly shot down by Aoi Hinami, who calls him out on that twisted line of thinking, using his own ideology against him by telling him how can he judge a game he's never bothered to play in the first place. So the show isn't really what it seems at first glance. However, it's no masterpiece, and there are other rom-coms on this list that are much better than bottom tier. I just want to get that out of the way first if you had reservations checking out this show because of that reason. For the most part, you follow Tomozaki as he's trained by Aoi on how to be a more presentable and sociable person. She gives him a lot of goals to achieve by a certain time and uses a lot of parallels to gaming to motivate and relate to Tomozaki, as he is the best Takfam player in the world. Takfam is essentially a Smash Bros. Clone, and coincidentally Aoi is the second best player in the world, but she's also able to hold that position while also excelling socially, unlike Tomozaki. For the most part, the show is about becoming your best self and discovering that life is what you make it. If you go into life with a dull and bleak outlook, that's exactly what you're going to get out of it. And it's the connections we make with others that make us better people. So the overall message and purpose of the story I found to be very strong. The execution, however, is mostly just okay. Bottom tier doesn't do a whole lot to stand out from the pack. With male-led rom-coms being already full of shut-ins and gamers, bottom tier already had an uphill climb to make to stand out. There were a couple moments and plotlines that I did enjoy though. There's this one about a character named Minami who grapples with how hard it can be to try your hardest at something and still come up short. I found her struggle to be well told for the most part. The first half covers a school president election between her and Aoi that mostly works to show Tomozaki's progress as a person. But after the election is when it focuses on Minami, and that was a really nice storyline, and probably the best in the show. The growing relationship between all the characters Tomozaki interacts with is sweet to watch, and Tomozaki's transformation to a more well-rounded person was well done in a believable way. He doesn't just get it, he struggles to improve, and his determination is genuine and great to see. I especially enjoyed watching Tomozaki and Kikuchi's relationship. Yes, Kikuchi is best girl Tomozaki, and there is zero room for debate. So if you do end up checking it out and want to see more, you'll probably want to pick up the light novel, as unfortunately it looks like the likelihood that we're getting a sequel is pretty low, as Blu-ray sales are not doing so hot apparently. But I can't really comment on the light novels compared to the anime. Overall though, bottom tier character Tomozaki is serviceable enough if you want to throw on a chill rom-com, but it doesn't do enough to last with you very long once you finish it, as I'll probably end up forgetting about this show after a few seasons. Okay, I feel like I'm going to need to explain myself here with this ranking. Jujutsu Kaisen is the 12th highest rated anime on AniList and the 27th highest rated on Mail. So it's clear that people loved this anime a lot. And let me just say, I get it, and I understand why people love this show, and I didn't hate it. In fact, I really liked it, but it's just not great. Perhaps excluding the animation, in which there are only 2 shows on this list where I liked the animation more, overall the show was just kinda average to me. In Jujutsu Kaisen, we primarily follow Yuji Itadori, a seemingly normal high school student with perhaps stronger than normal abilities, until he consumes a finger of the demon Sukuna in a last-ditch effort to save someone. Upon consuming the finger, Yuji's body becomes a vessel for the demon, and with that becomes a student of the Tokyo Metropolitan Technical High School of Sorcery. From there, the goal is to have Yuji find and consume all 20 fingers to exorcise Sukuna. With that brief synopsis, it may seem like the show has a clear goal it can use to its advantage to form a great and concise narrative, but it doesn't really take advantage of it. For the most part of the story, it just kind of drags its feet around with some moments that just seem like an excuse for an action set piece. And while the action moments in the show have emotional significance, moments on the surface, there isn't much there to get invested in or sink your teeth in, with the exception of maybe 2 or 3 moments. The magic system in place is really cool, and I love how each character is unique in how they use their curse abilities. Gojo and Inumaki's curse abilities are probably a couple of my favorites. Unfortunately, the show follows Yuji, who probably has one of the lamest abilities in the show by far, essentially boiling down to he's strong and he punches real good. I just couldn't get into Yuji as a main character. I'd rather have followed almost any other character in the show. He's just a simple character with good morals, and that's about it. He is very easy to understand, and that's just kind of boring to me in a show about life and death with a deep magic system. Yuji's 2 main friends are far more interesting and have far cooler abilities than Yuji. Nobara's hammer and nail techniques are notably really fun to watch. I'm also using the term friend really loosely here since they barely spend time with each other, yet the show seems to insist that these 3 are the bestest of friends, which Jujutsu Kaisen does a lot actually. It's like as if meeting someone and fighting once or twice with them qualifies as friends in this world. At best, that friendship is only just starting to form. Jujutsu Kaisen is a really good example of just doing one thing to near perfection while forgetting to put the same amount of effort into what makes a show memorable. The one thing that Jujutsu Kaisen does really well, near perfectly I would say, is the animation. Studio Mappa really brought the heat here with some of the best battle scenes ever put into animation. I have basically 0 complaints about the animation, not a frame is wasted in this show. The camera's movements are absolutely mesmerizing to witness, and the ways they have each character's curse techniques interact with each other is something to behold, which is why Jujutsu Kaisen still gets my recommendation. I just prefer a rich narrative to chew on while watching 2 people kick each other's ass, which isn't something you get from Jujutsu Kaisen unfortunately. But the jaw-dropping action is almost enough to make up for it. I just hope to see more when we get a sequel. I didn't think much of the first season of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. It had a neat premise, though it was not very original and a bit gimmicky for my tastes. What really matters to me is if you can tell a good story with that. For the most part, the story in season 1 was just kind of okay. Nothing terrible, but nothing of note either. The performances were really well done though, especially the main character Rimuru Tempest, and I really liked seeing an isekai main in the role of a country's leader, opposed to just being the overpowered character. I thought it was a nice touch that separated this show from other isekais more than the whole being a slime thing. And though the diplomacy and politics felt a bit shallow for my tastes in season 1, they do dial it up a little bit more in season 2. There are more talks about resources and trade with other nations, and the threat those other nations can pose if things don't go so well in their eyes. A lot of the events that occur are due to clear, understandable reasons and don't feel like an excuse to watch Rimuru let loose. It's nice to see this show slowly become something more. Rimuru is a really fun character to watch whether he's fighting or making trade deals. He just has this energy to him that can work in funny or somber moments. There are really only 2 complaints I have with this part of season 2. The first being the pacing. The show is pretty slow to start and doesn't really pick up until nearly the very end. I only saw this as a problem in the first half, as the second half is when the show starts to build up to the climactic moments, thus making it not feel as slow. But the first half is just a little bit too slow for my taste, and I feel like they could have done a lot more with the time they had. In the end though, I found the finale of this part satisfying enough to mostly make up for the slow pace of the first half. The other thing I wanted to comment on was the animation. For the most part, the animation is serviceable enough, but the show doesn't really have any standout moments of greatness, which is fine. There were only a couple moments where I found the animation lacking, mostly during certain fight scenes. That being said, it's nothing atrocious or even something really worth of noting, but it would be nice to see some really memorable animation from this series. But I do like the colors used in this show. They're very bright and inviting. One thing I really liked about the show that I don't see a lot of comments on is the show's sound design, specifically the sounds used for spellcasting. I don't know, they're just really satisfying to hear and fit perfectly with the visuals. So hats off to Yasumasa Koyama, who worked on the sound effects, and Jin Aketagawa, the sound director for this show. These two also seem to have worked on a lot of shows on this list. Like seriously, Jin himself is credited as sound director on 5 out of 12 of the shows on this list. And wow, he's also the sound director for A Certain Scientific Railgun S, still the highest rated show on my AniList account. Jeez, this guy's a legend. Okay, well, I mean, keep up the great work, you two. Anyway, the story is kind of hard to get into as it gets real spoilery real quick, so I'll try to be vague here. What I liked about it is we got to see the more serious side of things, where Rimuru has to grapple more with the ramifications of becoming a major player on the world stage as quickly as he has. It's all handled in a very believable manner, which really helps the more realistic political dynamic they're going for, though I would still like to see more of that. I can see That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime becoming something really great. It's definitely on the right track to make that happen, and you know I'll be there to see it hopefully happen. And don't forget, we do have Slime Diaries of Titus over this season if you really need to get your slime fix. With this season concluding in the summer 2021 season, I am excited to see how they improve, as well as where they take the story moving forward. I think that the Quintessential Quintuplets has found a good home with its new studio. This show is nice to look at, and from what I've heard, it's much closer to the artwork in the manga than the previous season. I really like the colors they use this season as well. They look much brighter than they did in season 1, and it works way better with the tone the show is going for. It's definitely a welcome change. If you don't know by now, Quintuplets is a rom-com about identical quintuplets who are being tutored by Futaro, a poor high school student who initially takes up the job for the pay. At first it's just because of the pay, but slowly the quintuplets and Futaro's relationship grow into something more than purely professional. The show is well known for its hook. It's revealed at the beginning of the show that Futaro at some point will end up marrying one of the quintuplets, and with a hook like that, it makes certain that most people will keep tabs on the show just to find out how it ends. The first season of Quintuplets I found to be a pretty decent rom-com, but a lot of the situations presented in the show dragged on just a bit too long. Notably the fireworks show, where it was mostly a drawn-out goose chase for one of the quintuplets, and I just found it to be boring at times like that. I still thought it was a fun show overall, but nothing about it stood out from the pack apart from its premise and hook. That being said, this season doesn't really share the same flaws as the original. In fact, season 2 is an improvement in every facet. There isn't a single thing about this season where I think they did worse than season 1. It was really fun to watch these characters interact with one another. All of the quintuplets have well-defined character traits that stand out from each other. You have Itsuki, the formal and earnest one, Yotsuba, the excitable athlete, Nino, the determined and strong-headed one, best girl Miku, the quiet and reserved one, and she who shall not be named. There wasn't any moment in the show where I felt like it was dragging its feet like I did in season 1. The characters' relationships are getting more complex and interesting, especially with Nino and the changes she goes through this season. It leads to a lot more interesting character interactions, and while some are kind of out there, they still make sense and don't feel like contrived reasons for drama. Unlike other rom-coms, you don't get the sense that they're going to drag this premise on as long as possible, or that it's going to rush its ending in the final moments. There is definitely a sense the plot is moving forward and isn't just using its hook to keep your attention, which is made even more clear because the manga is finished, so you know there's going to be some kind of conclusion. Will the ending be satisfying though? I don't know, it all depends on if Miku is the bride. Okay, well, I'm kidding for the most part. Most of the girls are great, and I would be happy with any of them being the bride in the end. Well, almost any of them. If you haven't gotten into quintuplets yet, I'd recommend getting into it now before the start of season 3. If you're a fan of rom-coms, then I think you'll really like this show, especially if you hate that a lot of them tend to not bother with the romance part of rom-com until the very end. It's fun to watch and root for your favorite, and the show does a good job keeping you engaged with more than just its great hook. I really don't have much in the way of complaints when it comes to the Quintessential Quintuplet season 2. It was a really solid season, and I can't wait to see what happens in season 3. Sometimes when you're reading or watching something, you can tell that the creator put a lot of passion into it and genuinely loves what their story is about. That's exactly what you get from Laid Back Camp. You can tell that the creator loves camping and all its little intricacies. I love that bit at the end of each show that tells you to be mindful of camp rules and to keep your campsite clean. Something tells me that little notice wouldn't be there if the author didn't care. This show will make you want to get out there and give camping a shot. I know I did after watching this. I was lucky enough to stumble across season 1 at a pretty stressful time in life, and this show worked wonders to ease my mind when I really needed it. Much is the same here with season 2. They definitely took the if it ain't broke, don't fix it approach to this season, which is exactly what they should have done. That being said, this season is slightly weaker than the last. The main appeal of Laid Back Camp is its relaxing tone and beautiful landscapes, but this season has a slightly less relaxing tone to it than the first season, and it suffers a bit from that. Rin has evolved a bit from the solo camper she was in season 1 and has embraced group camping a bit more. The group camping itself can be relaxing to watch. Season 1 proved that well enough, but with season 2 it feels a little more chaotic, with a lot more comedy gags and less quiet moments, which is where I think Laid Back Camp shined brightest. A lot of the chaos comes from the character Chiaki, who I always found to be the worst character in the show. She's in season 2 a lot more, and we rarely get a relaxing moment when she's on screen. They even go for a joke with Chiaki where she mocks a foreigner trying to ask a question in Japanese by making fun of his accent. It just makes her look like an asshole. I mean, cut the guy some slack. He's put more effort into his trip than most would. Just leave him alone. I don't know, maybe that joke works better on a Japanese audience, but I found it a bit annoying. It's not just Chiaki's fault, it's just that she was the source of a lot of it. Now, I've been bashing this show a bit here, so what's it doing this high in the list when I had no complaints about the last spot? Well, that's because in the end, it's still Laid Back Camp. While it has those moments I don't like, there's still those moments of relaxing camping, and when they happen, they reach higher heights than that of season 1. There are a lot of beautiful landscape shots and wonderfully cute educational moments. There's this really touching moment between Nadeshiko and her older sister that made me smile. We got a great scene with Rin and her grandfather. I love those parts so much. Unfortunately, there's just less of that this season. If I wanted to watch a relaxing anime in the future, I'm far more likely to put on an episode from season 1 than season 2. I still loved Laid Back Camp season 2, and there isn't really anyone I wouldn't recommend it to. The show is beautiful, the characters are wonderful for the most part, and it still delivered on what I wanted it to. The opening is so much fun to listen to, it has a great rhythm to it. I listen to it on the road all the time. The ending song is a lovely, relaxing song with great vocals accompanied by an acoustic guitar. I never ended an episode until finishing the ending song, and that's why this show is the only one where both the ending and opening song made the top 3 this season. I do hope we get a season 3 in the future. If not, that's fine, because as far as I'm concerned, Laid Back Camp is infinitely rewatchable. I don't think I could ever become disenchanted with it.
たわいもないこと話しながら
You know, there's not a lot of romantic comedies out there that find that perfect balance between romance and comedy. The latest one that I can think of might be Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai. Most shows will tend to lean more to one over the other, mostly the comedy side, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but there's always something special about a show that can find that balance, and Horimiya is one of those shows. Horimiya takes a pretty realistic approach to awkward high school relationships, how they start, how they evolve, and how some are destined to never begin. I loved it, and it was a breath of fresh air compared to the usual fare. Horimiya primarily follows the relationship between Kyoko Hori and Izumi Miyamura, and no, that's not a spoiler, the damn show title is a combo of their names. There's this cute naivete to the relationship as they slowly grow more attached to one another. The whole thing feels very natural. I will say this though, Hori and Miyamura's relationship steers dangerously close to being an abusive one. Hori is extremely possessive of Miyamura, and she's got this thing where she's a bit, well, you'll see if you watch it. Just please don't look at their relationship as something ideal or perfect, because it's certainly not. Hori and Miyamura aren't the only people the show follows. It shares an almost equal amount of time with their social circle. Horimiya somehow manages to make everything connected when it could have easily felt like 3 or 4 different stories going on at once. Again, another thing that Horimiya manages to balance just right. If opening the review with her didn't make it obvious, I particularly enjoyed the storyline following Sakura. I might be alone on this, but I thought it was the best of all the plot lines. I won't really get into it here as most of her story happens later in the show's run, but there's this adorable scene where she gives Yoshikawa some cookies and gets him to say that he loves Sakura in an adorably roundabout way. Enjoyed watching Miyamura. He has a great arc throughout the show, and I found his backstory captivating and very relatable. There are moments where he thinks back to his past self and seeing how far he's come with Hori. Those are some of the best moments in the show by far. The comedy almost always lands, but most moments aren't going to make you laugh like crazy, at least not for me, but it was great fun to watch each episode. There are a lot of funny running gags and some hysterical visual jokes. Much like the romance, the comedy is used to great effect and not done in excess. The opening of the show is great, and while the song is nice, it was really the visuals of the opening that give it the 3rd place spot this season. I'll never get tired of this shot, it's so well done. And while the ending song, Horimiya hides a lot of necessary story beats after the credits, which is a little annoying as not everyone sits through the credits. The last thing I wanted to touch on really quick is the soundtrack. I love this show's soundtrack, especially at the most dramatic moments. All the songs sounded lovely and fit in perfectly where they were. I always have a soft spot for somber piano music when done right, so props to Masaru Yokoyama on his work in Horimiya. In the end, I'd recommend Horimiya for sure to anyone. I don't know if we're getting a 2nd season or not, but regardless, the show works great on its own. Horimiya was the best rom-com this season, and watching it was some of the most fun I had in winter 2021. Well, damn, I was not expecting to love this season of Non Biyori as much as I did. This is the 3rd season of Non Biyori, and it is the best one so far. Non Biyori is looking to be one of those animes that just gets better with each season. If you don't know what Non Biyori is, it's a pretty simple show. It's about a small rural town and the people in it. While mostly following the antics of the core cast, Hotaru, Natsumi, Komari, and Renge, Non Biyori also has some great stories that follow other members of the town. It's just a great slice of life comedy. And while the last 2 seasons and the movie I enjoyed well enough, season 3 is probably the best and the funniest so far. Non Biyori's comedy is sort of unique in anime. I've found that most of the comedy in anime tends to be high energy with a lot of movement, dialogue, and or sounds. Instead, Non Biyori uses silence to its advantage a lot, letting the situation and circumstances lead the show instead. And that's so refreshing. I know this isn't the only show that uses comedy that way, but Non Biyori is definitely the most effective at it, and oh man, it was effective this season. Of course, the show also has its fair share of loud, fast-paced comedy, and it uses that excellently as well. There's a lot of long-running jokes at this point in the show, and Non Biyori uses all of them to its advantage, bringing back old characters and introducing some new ones, all without any of them feeling forced or out of place. Akane is a new character this season, and there's this really great joke with her and Hotaru, where Akane thinks Hotaru is older than her until she sees Hotaru acting like the kid she is. Or one of my favorites where Natsumi finds out that her mother is going to shadow one of her classes, and with Natsumi not being so smart, she, well, doesn't take it very well. I could go on. There are literally dozens of amazingly funny stories that I won't forget for a long time. But the show isn't all comedy. It slows down at times and lets you take in the atmosphere, or tells a story meant to tug at your heartstrings instead. The relationship between Renge and Candy Store is one of the cutest relationships I've ever seen, and you get plenty of that this season. You can't go wrong with getting into Non Biyori. I guess you could start at any point in the show, as there isn't really a wide overarching narrative, but you probably should start at season 1, as that's the best way to fully appreciate the humor the show has to offer you. The movie is pretty fun, but it is the least necessary, so don't stress if you can't get access to it. The manga did finish this year, and I'm not sure if the anime has covered all the source material yet, as it's a bit hard to tell since it jumps around a lot. Hopefully there's more, because I would kill for another season. I loved everything about Non Biyori Nonstop. This is another show on this list where I have no complaints. I don't think I'd want anything about this season changed. Great visuals, amazing cast as usual, and the best slice of life comedy in the winter 2021 season. Do yourself a favor and check it out if you haven't. I'm sure you'll love it as much, if not more, than I did. Attack on Titan was the first anime I watched that wasn't Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, or Sonic X. Does that count? Anyway, I remember loving it the first time. My 15-year-old mind was blown after seeing all the crazy action. As a 23-year-old now, season 1 still scratches that itch for me, but I've grown to like the more complex themes introduced in the later seasons. I never actually started season 2 though until just last year. It was a bit of a holy shit moment when I saw that there was not only a second season, but a whole third season as well. My brother and I marathoned it in no time at all. I went out and read the manga up to where season 3 ended, and I got hooked into it all over again. Clearly, I was extremely excited for the final season. So the question is, did MAPPA deliver? Well, yes, mostly. Okay, so we all know that this show had a lot of stupid, meaningless controversies. The new 3D animation, the idiots attacking animators online, the dumbasses reacting with hashtag thank you MAPPA for overworking your employees. Just know that I'm in neither camps, nor do I care to talk about this any more than I already have. But since we're here, let's get my take on the animation out of the way. I have no issues with the use of 3D animation. One of my favorite animes of all time is pretty much all 3D, and it established a gold standard on how to work in 3D. Also, side note, one of the best soundtracks ever made. And we know that the animators at MAPPA are talented as hell, and it shows. The animation is amazing. It's some of the best 3D model work out there. There was really only one time where I didn't like the animation. I don't know, there was something about the second episode where the animation didn't seem on the same level as the rest of the show. It looked floaty or something. You can see it on your screen, you might know what I'm talking about. I did need a couple of episodes to adjust to the new animation style, but it's not like it was night and day. I think the Titans that that worked best in 3D space were the jaw, cart, and colossal titan, as we've never actually seen this jaw titan in the other style. The cart titan is armored up so it looks different enough, and we are already used to the colossal titan in 3D, so if anything that was a facelift. The only titan that didn't translate really well with this animation was perhaps the beast titan, most likely due to all that hair. The attack titan looked great and the movements were nice and fluid, though I did note a couple of times where the animation looked a little robotic. The more subtle motions were more likely to come off that way. The scouts in the ODM gear were fun to watch, though I would have loved to see some more of that third-person cam view of the scouts zipping between buildings, but maybe we'll get that in the second half. In the end, the 3D animation was great, and I don't know what anime some of you saw to make you think this looks like shit, because I'd love to see that show. Am I a little disappointed that Studio Wit didn't do this season? I'd be lying if I said no. I'm almost always going to prefer 2D animation over 3D animation. I mean, just look at Mappa's 2D Attack Titan. What a beautiful boy. But that doesn't change the fact that this animation was still great. The episode Assault is one of the best shows of the series, and that featured some of the most memorable fight scenes in the entire series. But Attack on Titan is more than its animation and fight scenes, so how's the story? Well, unfortunately, I'll need to be a little bit vague here again. The episodes leading up to Assault were definitely the best, and honestly, I don't think there's room for debate on that. I think the show slips up just a little bit in its second half. The second half is very reminiscent of the political thriller that Season 3 Part 1 did. I just didn't think it was handled quite as well this time around, but it was still engaging, and it's not like it was a contrived plot or anything. Characters' feelings, decisions, and actions all make sense. You know exactly what's happening and why. It just didn't grip me as hard as the first time the show delved deeper into politics. Eren is nearly a fully realized character at this point. He has come so far from the screaming, angry anime protagonist of the first season to something far more interesting. He doesn't have time for this bureaucratic nonsense to accomplish his goals. Combine that with the fact that he's Eldia's greatest asset, and you've got yourself some juicy conflict there that I can't wait to see its full potential in part 2. The other characters you love are here as well. They just weren't very prominent this season, though Mikasa and Armin do get their fair share for sure. I really loved how their dynamic has shifted with their childhood friend. The tension is palpable whenever they share room, and I loved that. Hiroyuki Sawano is back to do the score this season. He's been here since the beginning. You know this show's score hits it out of the park every single time. Each season has its own intense, blood-pumping action song, and Season 4 is no exception to that. Another job well done. Funny enough, as I was writing this script, my vinyl set for Season 2 arrived. It looks great next to Season 1, and I hope they keep releasing more. The opening song is great, and the visuals were wonderful and unique compared to past Attack on Titan openings. The only thing keeping it from the top 3 is that the song was a little repetitive for my tastes. The opening for Season 3 Part 1, Red Swan, is still my favorite. The ending song though, that's some good stuff. Another one of those ending songs that kept me watching past the credits. It fits perfectly with the tone to cap off each episode. I don't know what I can say if you aren't watching at this point. Chances are you already are. The season was actually in third place for the longest time until one show slipped in at the last second. This season was great, and I'm so glad I get to be here to watch a modern classic reach its conclusion. If you had reservations checking it out because of all the stupid controversies or something, don't worry, not a single one of them matters. Just watch Attack on Titan, that's all. Yep, it was Re:Zero Season 2 that took the third place spot from Attack on Titan at the very end. Honestly, I was surprised. I enjoyed Re:Zero Season 1, especially after a repeat viewing, but the show had some problems that it needed to fix. Primarily with Natsuki Subaru, who is the main character. I really didn't like him in Season 1. He was annoyingly childish and was a bit of a hard character to get behind. And while I think that was the point, it was still grating on me. I enjoyed the story though, and I liked a lot of the characters surrounding Subaru. The ability that Subaru returns at arbitrary checkpoints each time he dies was used to great effect instead of looking like a cheap gimmick. The main thing I saw from Re:Zero after finishing Season 1 was potential, and the question of whether it would live up to its potential would soon be answered at the start of Part 1 Season 2. I enjoyed the first part of Season 2 a bit more than I did Season 1, though, you know, I couldn't help but feel like something important was missing. Just can't quite put my finger on it. Oh well, Season 2 is a much different season. For the most part, it ditches its open world and tells a very isolated story, which did lead to a couple of problems, mainly that while the first events of Season 2 happened because of what happened in Season 1, the outside world has little importance during Season 2. So there's this dynamic shift during this season where you just kind of have to go, I guess this is what we're doing now. Season 2 Part 1 featured some great writing though, and introduced a lot of questions that would need to answer in Part 2. ReZero was also probably the best show this season at invoking a sense of horror and dread in me. There were some scenes in Part 1 that I don't think I'll ever forget. They were masterfully done. Though nearing the end of Season 2 Part 1, the new isolated location of the sanctuary and mansion was starting to feel a little stale. What I wanted to see from Part 2 was for it to deliver on its promises and answer some of the questions it threw at you in Part 1 in a narratively satisfying way. And well, here's what I have to say. This is the best that ReZero has ever been, which is impressive since this season started itself off with a handicap. Each character this season was at their best. Subaru, who I did not like in Season 1, is now probably one of the best and most iconic isekai protagonists out there. He's finally grown past his worst qualities, and I really appreciate the show calling him out on his bad character traits, something other shows might not have done. I thought that Emilia was a decent character in Season 1, but was quite a passive character. Emilia improves as a character significantly though in this part, becoming a more active and motivated character. In fact, I only realized that she was voiced by the great Rie Takahashi when she finally had a moment of energy, and I noticed that she sounded an awful lot like Megumin from Konosuba. They also managed to keep the sanctuary setting from getting stale, and it's mostly thanks to the flashbacks with Echidna and Emilia. The flashbacks were probably some of the best moments in the whole season. They served well to answer a lot of those questions introduced in Part 1, and they are all answered in a satisfying way. But the show still managed to not play all its cards yet at the same time. There's still a lot more to do in ReZero. There's so many things that Subaru and the gang need to accomplish after this season, and I'm here for it. ReZero also had a great score, some of the best work this season perhaps. I haven't listened to any of the OSTs on this list in isolation yet, so I'm only going based on initial viewing, but the three standouts for sure were Horimiya, Attack on Titan, and ReZero. ReZero I would say was the best overall score this season though. So mad respect to Kenichiro Suehiro for his work on ReZero. If I had to summarize my feelings on ReZero Season 2 Part 2 in one word, I would say satisfying. ReZero has the most narratively satisfying conclusion this season, and I don't think I could have asked for more, which is why it only took the third place spot at the very end, because it all mattered on how ReZero Season 2 finished, and as far as I'm concerned, it stuck the landing.
花の色雲の影懐かしいあの思い出過ぎし日の過ぎし日の窓に残し
I saw the first episode of Wonder Egg Priority with my brother. I just wanted to check out the animation at first, so my intention was to just watch the first few minutes. But we ended up watching the entire first episode in silence. From that point on, I knew I was watching something special. Wonder Egg is the story about 4 girls who use Wonder Eggs to travel to a metaphysical reality, where they must protect the lives of girls who have passed away by helping them defeat their inner demons so that they may pass on. They do this in an effort to get back something that was lost from them. For Ai, it's to get back her best friend. Ai had isolated herself from others for the longest time due to the bullying she received in school because of her heterochromic eyes. Koito is the first person that showed her kindness and sympathy, and they quickly began to develop a friendship, until rather suddenly and without a known reason to Ai, Koito tragically committed suicide at school. So by saving these girls and defeating their demons, she is told that she'll be able to return her friend back from death. And the other 3 girls all have similar reasons for going out and entering this reality. They all want to get back something something that was taken from them. All of the girls have some form of trauma or life circumstances that prevents them from reaching out to others and instead took on a life of toxic independence. I won't go into all the other girls' backstories in too much detail, as you should really watch for yourself, but Wonder Egg Priority handles all of them with the perfect amount of subtleness, while also not shying from how dark their lives are. Wonder Egg is not afraid to make you hurt, and as odd as it sounds, that's what makes the show amazing. Of the 4 girls, the ones that I found myself latching onto the most were Ai and Rika. Rika's storyline being the one I found myself the most invested in, as I've experienced similar circumstances to her and have been in her state of mind time and time again. Momoe has the weakest story in my eyes, but that might also be because I'm a guy, and I think her narrative might better serve a female lens. Nehru's plotline is the strangest, as it's the least likely for you to sympathize with, and though Nehru and Momoe's plotlines aren't relatable to me, that doesn't mean they were bad. A story doesn't need to be relatable to be great, and I still love their storylines so much. I just got attached to Ai, and especially Rika's, because I've been in their shoes, though not necessarily to their extremes. Where Wonder Egg Priority really comes into its own is when the ensemble cast is finally formed. After knowing who each character is and spending time with them, they start to run into each other due to their shared mission. Seeing these broken people be slowly lifted from the depths of darkness by nothing more than the thoughtful consideration and support from others was Wonder Egg's strongest narrative, because it can amaze you at how little it takes for someone to sink into despair, but it's more amazing to see how little it really takes to start to bring someone back. I loved every single thing Wonder Egg Priority had to provide. Of all the shows on this list, it had the best narrative, overarching themes, and perhaps the best animation on the list. Though that one I do go back and forth on with the first spot. Few shows can pull off what Wonder Egg did without falling flat on its face or sounding preachy, but Wonder Egg doesn't even get close to faltering at any point. Hell, I even watched the recap episode. There wasn't a single moment in the entire series where I felt disengaged from the characters and their struggles. Watching the 4 girls' relationships grow into something genuine was beautiful. The opening song is by far and above the best opening of the entire season. It is the most amazing arrangement I've heard in a while. The sound of a quiet acoustic guitar, a flowing bass line, an enchanting violin, and a somber yet hopeful piano track all worked wonders alongside the amazing vocal work of the 4 voice actresses of the main girls. I loved everything about this opening, and it's more than earned its spot as the best opening of winter 2021. Unfortunately, with all that said, I wouldn't recommend Wonder Egg Priority. At least not yet. You see, I was under the impression that the show would finish at its final episode, and I thought that until the credits rolled in episode 12. At first I thought that I must have missed something, or maybe I didn't understand the ending. But no, apparently we're getting a 1-episode special in June that's supposed to conclude the story. And while episode 12 was still one of the best and most expansive episodes in the season, I would be lying if I said that it didn't leave a bad taste in my mouth. I'm ecstatic that we're getting more Wonder Egg, but I wish I knew this going in. This show gets my highest recommendation for sure. I would just recommend holding off until the story's actually finished. If you want, you could watch it now, just don't expect a satisfying conclusion at the end yet. But I do have full faith in Cloverworks to bring this series to a satisfying end. And as far as I'm concerned, their work on Horimiya and Wonder Egg Priority more than makes up for whatever the hell happened with The Promised Neverland. There was no story on this list that I felt attached to more. Wonder Egg Priority is a masterclass in showcasing both the dark and beautiful sides of humanity, and there are few things I'm more excited for than this story's conclusion. Wonder Egg Priority in the end was a wonderful tale of love, loss, and how we aren't nearly as alone in this world as we think we may be. It's pretty rare that I end up loving a fantasy show or movie. I think that most fantasy shows end up missing the point of the genre, and this is very prevalent in the anime scene, especially in the realm of medieval high fantasy. They primarily focus on trying to be as epic as possible as often as they can, or come up with some convoluted gimmick that rarely ends up being captivating, which only leads to them feeling cookie cutter and bland. You need your world to feel grounded, intimate, and real before you can even begin to hope to blow my mind with epic animation or action set pieces. And I have never seen another anime that accomplishes that important part of fantasy better than Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation. I've never been more in love with a fantasy world than this one, and that's amazing when I know so little about it. Only as much as the character Rudeus Greyrat would at his age. Well, at least his physical age. If you don't know, Mushoku Tensei is an isekai anime. Yeah, I was surprised that 2 isekais managed to crack the top 3 this season, when normally I don't care for the genre all that much. Before being reincarnated, he was a shut-in loner with no ambition or aspirations. After being kicked out of his home, he notices a bus about to hit a few pedestrians, and in the process of trying to save them, he is hit by the bus and dies. He is then born into a new world as Rudeus Greyrat, part of a simple family of Paul and Zenith Greyrat, along with their maid Lilia. Rudeus is unlike most isekai mains in that he doesn't have a special ability or gimmick. He doesn't start out life as a full-grown person. He literally has to start at the beginning of his life. The only advantage he has is that his 34-year-old mind sticks with him. After getting in a tiny accident, he discovers this world has magic when his mother heals him with a simple healing spell. Rudeus quickly becomes enchanted by the idea of magic and starts to research all that he can. With the benefit of a young growing mind, he is able to quickly grasp it and excels quickly. His parents then hire an instructor named Roxy to further his talents with magic. As the story continues, you will also meet other characters like Sylphiette and also Eris, who he ends up being hired as an instructor to teach. I loved every single main character in this show. I adored all their designs, their distinct features and personalities, and how they all interact with Rudeus, as well as the rest of the cast. It's such a simple story on the surface, but there are so many subtleties, and looking back on just the 11 episodes that covered the first half of season 1, so much happened in an incredibly natural way. I particularly enjoyed how the show delved into what kind of person Rudeus' father was. I loved watching Eris and Rudeus interact. Roxy was particularly great, and I can't wait to see more of her, which it looks like that's what we're going to get. Sylphia is a nice character, and she has a sweet relationship with Rudeus. The show just doesn't spend a whole lot of time with her. Everything is perfectly integrated. Nothing is added without purpose, and nothing happens in the story without reason or intrigue. A fantastical story through and through. And you can't talk about Mushoku Tensei without mentioning the masterful animation at work here. I don't think I even need to say anything to convince you that the animation is top-notch and had one of, if not the best animation this season, which is impressive since this is Studio Bind's first series as the lead animation team. Though, to be fair, they are partially owned by White Fox. But nothing can really take away from just how big of an achievement this show's animation is. Every frame looks like a beautiful tapestry and meshes perfectly with the setting, only serving better to further absorb you into the world. The ending song was the best this season. If you couldn't tell by now, I really like it when an ending song is simpler. I find it works best at capping off most shows. I loved the acoustic guitar that starts the whole thing off. And it's not only the song, we get some of the best animation in the whole series in the ending scenes, which makes it even better that you get to see it at the end of each episode. The competition for the top ED spot was fierce this season, but I think Mushoku Tensei only just beat out the other 2 in the top 3. I guess I should cover one thing really quick before we conclude here, and before I get into it, let me just say this. I have essentially 0 complaints when it comes to Mushoku Tensei. This is my favorite isekai so far, and I see it as the gold standard of the genre, just based on the 11 episodes so far. But some people may have an issue with a couple of the scenes in the show, and I get it. Rudeus is a child with the mind of a 32-year-old perverted adult. He is not an admirable character in the slightest, and the show doesn't treat it that way. At no point does Mushoku Tensei try to come up with an excuse for his behavior, or even get close to pretending that some of his actions are okay. And because of that, Rudeus learns and does slowly become a more redeemable character. Though don't get me wrong, he still has a long way to go. So if hearing that makes you think you may not be able to handle it, then perhaps this show isn't for you. But I'd still say give it a shot and see if you can see things my way when it comes to some of those more questionable scenes. I would recommend anyone watch Mushoku Tensei though, and definitely get caught up before the summer 2021 season, as part 2 will be releasing then. I really think we've got a future modern classic here. This is looking to be a truly epic quest that you'll want to get in on sooner rather than later. I haven't seen a fantasy world I've loved this much and this quickly. I am completely enraptured by it. And that's why Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation was the best anime to air in the winter 2021 season. It was truly an amazing experience. Hey there, thanks for sticking around to the end. Whether you were a trooper and watched the whole thing, or just checked out the shows that interested you, I just want to say thanks for watching. This video was a lot of work and ended up being longer than I expected, but I still had a lot of fun looking back on this season. Since it was a lot of work though, I would say to only expect videos like this once every season, but I do have other things on the channel right now, like game reviews and stream highlights, but also definitely more anime related videos coming soon. If you want to see more, you know what to do. If you want to check out my live streams, my Twitch is in the description. If you disagree with me, or if I got something wrong, please let me know. These aren't heavily researched videos, but I do try to make sure I don't make any factual mistakes. With all that said though, I really hope you enjoy the video, and I hope you stick around for the next season review, as I'm really enjoying what I've seen so far. Bye bye.